Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley, and for the better part of the past 26 years, I have had the most distinct and honorable pleasure of working alongside and coaching some of the world's top peak performers. What we do here each week is we simply bring their ideas, their experiences, their wisdom to you. You ever feel sometimes you're stuck on that hamster wheel of life and you're spinning and you're just not going anywhere? You're just going in the wrong direction. Well, if so, you have landed in the right spot. The Bamboo Lab Podcast is created, written, and broadcast just for you, all you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. All right, before we get to introducing our amazing guest today, just some housekeeping thoughts here. Currently, as of this morning, we are being listened to and followed avidly on 6 continents, 31 countries, 47 states, and in 665 cities across this great nation of ours. I want to share a heart letter. As most of you Bamboo Pack members know by now, our goal is to receive 10,000 letters, text, emails, messages from listeners like you who share with us exactly what the Bamboo Lab Podcast is doing for their lives. This one comes from the state of Washington. Just simply said, I just wanted to drop you a like and say hello. I appreciate the podcast, great takeaways in all of them. I started a Brian Bosley note section on my phone with bullet points and nuggets to revisit and remind me of certain things. Very powerful. Thanks. Well, what that means is the guests I have on here, like the one we have today, are really spreading some amazing messages that are changing the course of people's lives. This episode is dedicated to my niece, Grayson, and I know she'll be listening as she starts her first week at university in Sudbury, Ontario. Honey, this is your moment in life. Like I share with you over text, this is the moment for you in your life you will have the greatest experience up until now in your life. This will be the greatest chapter in your book right now. Sit back, enjoy it. Remember every single moment. Take memories, pictures in your memory, and by all means, give it your damn best. We love you. We're proud of you, and we can't wait to hear your amazing stories and see you move on to change the course of the world. This one's for you, Gray. Let us dissect. All right. We have today on the Bamboo Lab Podcast a friend of mine of 40-some years. You know what's so interesting? And somebody asked me this last week. They asked me in the 40 episodes up until that point, this is episode number, we're 43, 44 now. But they asked me after 40 episodes, what's the greatest learning you've had so far? And quite frankly, it's the fact that I'm shocked, that I'm surprised, I'm surrounded by so many accomplished, amazing people who are a wealth of knowledge. When you start sending out emails and texts and phone calls in your inner circle to ask people, will you be on this podcast I started? And they come on and they share such immense wisdom. I'm shocked. My eyes are finally open, and I think we all have that in our lives where we have such amazing people right in our back door. People who are close to us all of our lives have so much depth and wisdom to share with us. And today's guest is no different. Today we have Brother Jim Boynton. He is currently the 30th president of U of D Jesuit High School and Academy in Detroit, Michigan. Mr. Boynton truly embraces the Jesuit Catholic mission through his personal lived experience as a Jesuit brother. He is a leader who cares deeply about the community he serves, and I know there are few who love U of D Jesuit more than Brother Boynton. That was by Father Kaiser, who welcomed him into the university or to the position, and I read this in an article. His educational experience has been shaped by 35 years of teaching. 35 years of teaching, advising, philanthropic cultivation, and executive leadership. He has spent 15 years at U of D Jesuit, demonstrating a passionate commitment to and expertise in Jesuit education through a heartfelt, student-centered approach. Brother Jim is also a gifted fiddler and singer and an avid hunter. He loves the outdoors. He loves history. He has loved history since I remember him being a very young teenager. Loves music, and he loves the islands in northern Michigan. And currently, Brother Jim Boynton calls Detroit, Michigan, his home. My friend, Brother Jim Boynton, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be here. Thanks.
You are quite welcome. All right. Well, I know who you are. Of course, after 40-some years, I hope I know who you are. And, can you please share with the Bamboo Pack, who's Brother Jim Boynton, your childhood, your family? Just tell us where you're from.
Sure, yeah. Well, like you, like a lot of people that I've heard on this Bamboo Lab, I grew up in St. Agnes, Michigan, and that's always my home. On my mother's side, my mother's maiden name is Goodrow, we're 8 generations in St. Agnes, and my dad's side, Boynton, we're 5 generations. And that place is deeply home to me, although I left there in 1985 to go up to Lake Superior State College, where you live just down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
So who am I? St. Agnes has shaped who I am. Growing up in a small town, being a Youper, like that a lot. And as a kid, I always loved history and worked at Father Marquette's gravesite. I was a tour guide on Mackinac Island at the fort. I was a tour guide at the fort in Mackinac City, Fort Michilimackinac. Majored in history up at Lake State. Then after my sophomore year of college, for whatever reason, I joined the Jesuits. I joined the Jesuits at age 20 and moved to Detroit when I did that. And my Jesuit training has taken me, everywhere. It's taken me to Detroit. I finished studies in New Orleans. I worked for a while in India. I did a master's out in Boston, taught in Cleveland, taught in Detroit. Although the years I was teaching, one of the great things I would do when school would end, I would jump in the car as soon as I turned in my grades, and I'd come up to Mackinac Island, where I worked at St. Anne's Church in the summers, running the summer programs mostly for the foreign workers, for Mexican workers, Filipino, Jamaican. And at St. Anne's Church, we did the programs for the foreign workers. And then when the summer was over, I'd come back and teach again. When I finished teaching in Detroit, worked for a while in Mexico. I recruited for the Jesuits for a while. I taught a couple years in Haiti. Came back and taught at U of D High again, always teaching either history, mostly history, but some theology if they needed it. Continuing to work on the island, on Mackinac Island. And then I came back to U of D High in 2019, where this was the first time not full-time teaching. I taught some, did some development. A couple years ago, I was principal, and now I'm the president of this school.
It's so funny sitting in some of the classes we sat in high school to look at you right now and say you're the president of a Jesuit high school and academy in Detroit, Michigan. That's pretty, I mean, I'm not saying I'm shocked, but it's definitely, it's so inspirational, Jim. You know, other than Bo 74, when you were a child, who was your greatest inspiration?
Oh, well, Bo 74 was a huge inspiration. Well, you know, I think the easy answer is going to be mom, dad, grandparents, family, and they certainly were. But I want to move beyond that. And my grandfather had 2 very good friends that he had when he was growing up, and then when he moved to a different section of town. One of them, at least, lived right next to him again. And when my grandfather died, when I was in junior high, these 2 guys kind of took over. And one guy was Lawrence Bushy, and he lived on High Street. He was born January 7th, 1903. And the guy right across the street from him was Eddie Tebow. He was born July 13th, 1899. And I used to go after school in the evenings, always on Sundays. I would visit Lawrence, I would visit Eddie, sometimes the 2 of them together, and they'd tell me their stories, and I was just amazed. Lawrence worked in the lumber camps when he was a kid. He worked on the Great Lakes freighters, was on a ship that sunk. Told me stories of things like the 1918 flu epidemic. Eddie Tebow was in World War I and World War II. Wow. And would tell me those stories. Also worked in the lumber camps, worked on the Great Lakes freighters. And I would just be enraptured listening to their stories, sitting there. I mean, Eddie would be smoking his pipe as he was talking to me, and he had a cut off. He lost part of a finger in the war, and when he would smoke that pipe, he would tap down the pipe with that nub. I would think this is the coolest guy in the whole world. And those two guys were a huge, huge influence on me. Just how they embrace life, how they enjoy each other's company and other people's company. They walked all over town together. And we're happy to share their stories with this kid, that was the grandson of one of their friends. And so, Lawrence and Eddie, I was home just third week of August. I was home. I went up to the cemetery, swung by their graves just to see them.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So those guys, Lawrence and Eddie, were huge, huge impact on me.
Were Lawrence and Eddie, were they the impetus to you really getting so involved and interested in history?
Yeah, I would listen to their stories, and I mean, World War I. I mean, that was just amazing. I mean, that Eddie was born in 1899. So, I mean, this would have been in the 80s when I would have really been visiting him when I was in junior high, and then in high school. We both graduated in 85. So when I graduated, I'd go see him, and Eddie would be 86. To me, that sounded, I mean, it was just absolutely ancient. Mm-hmm. But again, you'd read history, and I'd read about Fort Michilimackinac, the early explorers and the voyageurs. But in my mind, these guys lived it. Lawrence used to talk to me about he was on a tugboat when the tugboat went down, and I have the name written down someplace. I forget the name of it, but he was on a tugboat that went down. They used to go out off Eagle Fett, and there was a ship, the J. Oswald Boyd, that had run aground, and they talked to me about going out there and stealing aviation fuel off of that ship and bringing it back and using that aviation in the fuel in their Model Ts or their hunting camps or
whatever they needed.
Because these guys to me were living history books, and a huge inspiration.
That is amazing. Now, the names both sound familiar. Now, I didn't have any, I don't think any personal contact with either one, but the names are very familiar to me. So that's.
They both lived on High Street, right? But my grandparents, Goodrose and Boyens, lived across the street from each other, and Lawrence lived right next door to my grandma Boynton, and Eddie lived next door to my grandma Goodrow.
So amazing, don't you think, Jim? Sometimes that when growing up in St. Ignace, you didn't, of course, but so many of us, myself included, really took for granted the history, the rich history of that community in that area, the Straits area. It's just, I mean, I worked on Mackinac Island the summer of 1986. Between my freshman and sophomore year, myself and John Olson were over there digging ditches. And the interesting things we would find as we dug ditches behind buildings or, behind an old restaurant or a house along a fence line, it was not every day we would find something, a marble or a musket ball or, it was I never found a coin or an arrowhead, but I think John did. But just, everywhere we looked and it really made me start to appreciate the depth of history we have in that area. And I think a lot of people take it for granted.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of things I did take for granted and a lot of wasted time in my life, but history wasn't one. I always loved the history of the Straits of Mackinac. I used to love to weed the garden. I did find arrowheads in our garden and coins and military buttons. I was obsessed with that kind of stuff. Still am.
Yeah, that's great. I remember going to the fort one year and seeing you up in the fort, I think reenacting something on the island.
Yeah, I was a tour guide up there.
Okay, that's what it was. Okay. Well, you obviously you've seen a lot of changes being in the academic world over the past several years. Can I ask you, in the last 3 years, what have you seen as some of your greatest learnings or your greatest learning over the past year in your field of study? What has it been?
Well, that's a great question. And the last 3 years, of course, are the years of COVID. Mm-hmm. And education, I learned this. Kids need to socialize. People need to socialize. So when we were shut down, so to speak, because of COVID and only teaching through Zoom or through the internet, and the kids were not coming together, I learned so much that the most important thing about education isn't whether you learn your math problems or how to diagram a sentence. It's together. It's socializing. It's understanding and learning from the students in the class with you, and being part of a community. And when we had the COVID shutdown, I'm sure there was a community in a sense, but not one that you could be right next to the person. And that's what I learned, how important it is to have others in your lives, to be part of something bigger than yourself, be part of communities, whether that be family or teams or classrooms or grades, whatever it is. We need to be with each other and learn that very strongly, and those are the lessons that our kids lost out on most, I believe. But not only our kids, we as just people in society, and so that's what I would say the last couple of years. And COVID was difficult, especially down here in metropolitan Detroit, and so it helped us. It helped us, I think, to put things in perspective. This year we had our opening. We are not setting as public schools starting the day after Labor Day. We're in our third week of school already. But the kids were excited to be back. They were happy to be with each other and to be on the grounds of the school. And same with teachers as well, to have kids in the building and to be here.
And I always thought when we were in high school, it might have been kind of fun to have go home and being taught. Of course, we didn't have virtual learning back then, but I think it's another one of those things we really took advantage of, or took for granted, is the ability to socialize with each other, the ability to be together. And I want to encapsulate and support what Jim just said for a moment for all you Bamboo Pack members. And this is a good write it down moment. Really, when you think about what Jim just said in so many ways, whether it's talking about Lawrence and Eddie, or talking about the school and the learnings he's had over the past 3 years, is the ability and the opportunity for us to be together as humans is incredibly powerful. Lawrence and Eddie being together, and they embraced life. They really enjoyed each other's company. They walked around town together, and they incorporated other people like young Jimmy Boynton into their conversations. And now learning that after COVID and the quarantine, how crucially important it is for us to spend quality time together, physically together, not just virtually. We need to be with each other. And those learnings right there are things that I think throughout the course of our lives, at least for me, I took for granted until we had a moment in our history where we really couldn't be together. And so now for all of us out there, this is an opportunity. Things are opened back up fully. We are fully back to the point where we can socialize. We can spend quality time with loved ones, friends, and family. We can bring in young Jimmy Boynton into our lives and share our life stories with them and teach them and let them go on, take that journey on for the next generation. This is a time for us to capture and really realize what we almost lost and what we did lose for a very short period of time. We need to be with each other. Perfect quote from Brother Jim. All right, this is a question, Brother Jim, that I ask everyone. And you can go deep as you want or shallow as you want. But over the course of your life, what is the most difficult thing you've gone through?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Get the latest insights from top mortgage pros on Mortgage Connects, a podcast by MGIC. We interview thought leaders from across the industry to share their wide-ranging expertise and candid views on critical market developments and current housing trends. Our guests reveal highly effective marketing and referral strategies, training tips and best practices, and what you can expect from the mortgage market in the future. Hear from experts like best-selling author Todd Duncan, U.S. Bank's Lenny McNeil, and Freddie Mac's Danny Gardner. Listen to Mortgage Connects on your favorite app or at mortgageconnects.com today.
Well, that's very easy to answer, and I can go as deep as you want. In in 2009, I was assigned to Haiti, to the country of Haiti. And I had been teaching here in Detroit. I taught in Cleveland. And my Jesuit superiors asked me if I was open to going international. I said, I'd love to go international. It was kind of funny. The guy said to me, well, you know Spanish. I said, yes, I do. I had learned Spanish working in Mexico. And he said, well, we're going to send you to Haiti. And I said, they don't speak Spanish in Haiti. He said, well, don't you know French? And I had taken French from Shan Brown with you, I think.
Yes, yeah, you did.
And I said, well, they don't speak French there. They speak Haitian Creole. He says, well, you'll learn it. So I did go to Haiti and went there in 2009. And I became the principal of a little school called St. Ignace School, because St. Ignace is St. Ignatius in French. So our hometown means St. Ignatius, and Ignatius was the founder of the Jesuit order that I'm a part of. I was at St. Ignace École in Wanamette, and on January 12th, 2010, there was a 7-point-something earthquake that brought Haiti to its knees. And that ended me being principal there. Where I was and when I met, most of the buildings were made out of mud and thatched roofs, so there wasn't a whole lot of death and destruction there. Buildings fell. And I remember when the earthquake happened, shortly before that, I had been playing my fiddle for some of our students, and they were dancing to the music. And I went in, and I was Skype was new then, so we hitched up the computer and fired up the generator, and I got Skype going. I was Skyping with my mom and my dad and my two sisters when the earthquake hit. And I had known it was an earthquake because I was in one in Mexico. I ran outside, and those kids were still out there, and as they had been dancing to the music of my fiddle, they kind of were dancing to the movement of the earthquake, just goofing around. But it was shortly after that we realized that this was a bad thing. This earthquake was pretty bad, and actually through the Skype, my parents told me that it was even worse in Port-au-Prince because we didn't have communication with Port-au-Prince. And within a day or so, we had found out how bad this earthquake was, and I was contacted by my superiors telling me they wanted me to do a medical brigade because I'd done many of those before in the past in Latin America. And I was figuring out how I was going to do this medical brigade when I got an email from a guy named William McNulty, who was a graduate of one of our Jesuit high schools in Chicago, and he had been a former military, and he told me that he was getting together with a group of people to organize a medical brigade to Haiti, but they needed help. And so we Skyped. I told him to get a letter of he was in Washington, D.C., to get a letter from the Haitian embassy of passage for us. I went over to the Dominican Republic, went to Santo Domingo, and met these guys, and then we went into Port-au-Prince. And this was a group of 8 of us, and it turned into what is today called Team Rubicon. And Team Rubicon is a very large disaster relief organization. So, Brian, if there's a earthquake or a flood up in the UP, Team Rubicon will be there. They will. You'll see them on the news quite a bit. But handling the aftermath of that earthquake in Haiti, there was something like 300,000 people died in that earthquake. And we were there in Port-au-Prince during disaster relief. I remember from the second that we arrived, started immediately with our doctors and working on broken pelvises and broken bones, and we would go into the refugee camps, and the death and the destruction and the wounded people that we were around, that I was around, it was overwhelming. It really was. It was so that would have been for about the 3 months after the earthquake, and those are 3 months that are. I remember them very well, but they're also just a blur. It was 3 months on adrenaline. I would assist doctors with operations outdoors. I remember one time our school system, Brian, we had a flatbed truck. The school system, the Jesuit school system in Haiti is called Foi et Joie, Faith and Joy. In Latin America, it's Fe y Alegría. It's a big network of schools. But we had a flatbed truck, and so we were asked if we would go around and collect dead bodies, and we would load them on the back of that truck. And it was just like you see in the History Channel of the Holocaust. And we would put on double rubber gloves, face mask. We'd put Vicks Formula 44 on our face mask because the smell of the dead bodies was just so awful. I remember loading those on the back of that truck and thinking, how in the world did little Jimmy Boynton from St. Agnes end up down here in Haiti doing this? But it was all, it all was part of, I don't know, it all unfolded somehow. And somehow I ended up in Haiti, and somehow I was doing that. And, you kind of plow through. And my biggest memory of that was doing that for about 6 weeks. And the doctors that were coming down to help us, I had a group from Chicago that came down, and we'd worked one day, and then the next day the head doctor came to me and he said, "We're not working today." And I said, "No, yes, we are." And he said, "No." He said, "I've talked to the whole crew, and we're not working." I said, "Well, what are you guys on strike?" And he said, "No, you need a break." And I said, "No, I don't need a break. We can keep doing this." And he said, "No, if you do it, you're going to do it by yourself." He said, "I've called a place about an hour outside of Port-au-Prince, and we're going there." And I went kicking and screaming. And we went there, the doctors, and I got there. He ordered a beer for me, a Presidente beer, and sat there drinking it. And then he said, "There's a shower." And I went and I took my first shower in about 6 weeks. And I remember taking that shower and just crying. And you couldn't even tell, obviously, because I was in the shower. But then came back, and he put a computer in front of me with internet access. And he said, "You might want to look at this." And I hadn't had internet access in about 6 weeks. And just going through it, I signed in and went through my emails. And there were a gazillion emails, and it was from former students and family and friends and people who had thought that I had died in the earthquake, and then wrote and said, "I heard you didn't die." And getting those messages from people for my whole life, it was just amazing. We took a break for a day, then we went back, and I stayed in Haiti for another year after that, working with disaster relief and eventually construction. But that was by far, nothing even comes close to that. Today, if I have a bad day, I think, well, it's not even close to an earthquake in Haiti. So,
do you realize that myself, as well as the Bamboo Pack members, are right here, are little Jimmy Boynton, and you have turned around and become Lawrence and Eddie? You're living history, Jim.
Never thought of that, but yeah, it's like going down in a
tugboat, or
and a tugboat, or being in World War I or World War II, and it's amazing. I would never want to do that again, but I wouldn't give that experience up for anything. It totally shaped who I am today.
Wow. Well, you are living history. There is no doubt. And I think for myself, and I think for the Bamboo Pack members, when you were sharing that story, I try to write a lot, but I found myself just looking outside my window, listening to everything you said. And I questioned myself, and, I would ask the Bamboo Pack members and listeners out there, little Jimmy Boynton from St. Agnes, Michigan, found himself in Haiti for several months, couldn't shower for 6 weeks. I mean, help assisting doctors with surgery outdoors, hauling dead bodies and putting them in the back of trucks, loading them up, and it was overwhelming for him. How many of us are prepared? And can we really actually be proactively prepared for something like that? I don't know. But I would ask myself, how would I react? who am I? Who is the man behind the podcasting microphone, and what is he like when a real emergency hits? And I think we could all use and ask ourselves that question of who are we when emergency hits and when the world needs us? You definitely proved to yourself and to the world who you are when the world needs you, Jim. So well done. I wish you wouldn't have had to go through that, but I'm certainly glad if somebody had to, it was you, and you came out a stronger man and impacted the lives of so many people. So the next question then is, when you look at your life, Jim, what do you consider to be a win? As you are now the 30th president of U of D Jesuit High School and Academy, what is a win for you?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, I'm Evan Neufeld, and this is the Canadian Money Roadmap Podcast. Every 2 weeks, I'll provide you with actionable ways that you can invest smarter, reduce taxes, and retire with confidence. This podcast is for Canadians who want to have a better understanding of their money. As a certified financial planner, my goal is to make the complex simple and put you in the driver's seat when it comes to your money. So come along and join me on the Canadian Money Roadmap Podcast.
A win for me is now they're long-term wins. You're a grandpa, so you get this. Obviously, well, not obvious for people that don't know. Jesuit brothers take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So I don't have any kids, but watching a kid grow up, and my oldest students now, Briar, kids I taught when I was in Cleveland. They're now 47. Those were juniors and seniors that I taught. Big group of guys that I taught are 45. I was 24. They were 14. But to watch these kids who were, adolescents, as every adolescent was, you and me. I remember, the shenanigans we used to do in Mr. Ritcho's class or whatever. So the kids that used to do that and misbehave in class or goof around or just be goofy. And not that I mind that at all, but watch them grow up, and now they're parents. And so many of them have reached the potential that we all knew that they had. And I don't care if they're doctors or lawyers or teachers or engineers or firefighters or detectives, whatever they're doing, as long as they're reaching their potential. And when you see kids reach their potential, especially if they had to struggle to do it. I had one kid, he'll know who he is if he ever hears this, I won't say his last name, William. William I taught here at U of D Jesuit, and man, he was a bright kid, but he got kicked out of the school. He got kicked out for a number of reasons, and I've always kept in touch with him. He went into the military. He learned, he became a Korean translator. But then he went on to Georgetown, and he's the only kid that he knows of and that I know of that got into Georgetown on a GED because he never graduated U of D Jesuit. And then went on to Michigan Law School. He's now married. He's got a kid. I talk to him a couple times a year, but he's to me, there's a success. Mm-hmm. This was a kid that was very bright, veered away from reaching his potential, but got back on the path, and is now a dad and a husband and a professional, and really contributing. And there's so many of those kids that they come back. Now there are kids at the school who I taught their parents, and you look and say, wow, where did the time go? Mm-hmm. But that these kids that I taught 20-some years ago are now raising their own kids. And it just makes me so proud of them. And I say, all right, what we're doing, this is good. And some of them are back here as teachers. Some of my former students are teachers here at the school. I have a poster on my wall. Obviously, you can't see this, but I got a poster on my wall of kids that I taught that have joined the Jesuit order and are now are Jesuits. And that's pretty cool.
That is really,
so I like that.
That is so great. You hear that a lot, not a lot, but I hear that from teachers sometimes, but I know, knowing you, that is really what you strive for. That is really what makes your heart tick and makes you, get an extra step in your beat in your step, is seeing those students that are now, 30s, 40s, who are making a difference in the world and, passing on some of that wisdom and experience you gave them and shared with them. Now they're passing that on to the next generations and to their chosen professions and fields. All right. I'm going to ask you a question that you're the first guest I've asked this for, but I'm going to be asking this each week, Jim. Now, if you could go back and you could talk to your 20-year-old self, back when you were Jimmy Boynton, before Brother Jim Boynton, before you were the 30th president of U of D Jesuit High School and Academy, if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell yourself would be the recipes for success? Things that you want to make sure that 20-year-old Jimmy Boynton knows so he can carry forward.
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, let's go back to when I was 20. Brian, what is today? It's September 6th. September 3rd, 1987, my 20-year-old self joined the Jesuits. And I'm certain that many of your listeners have no idea who the Jesuits are or what we do. We're a Roman Catholic religious order. We're pretty well known for education. I mentioned Georgetown, Boston College. The school that I am teaching at right now, or working at U of D, is a Jesuit school in Detroit. So 20 years ago, I joined this group, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. There is, when we have students come to a Jesuit school, our motto is men for others. If it's ours is an all-boys school, but if it's a co-ed school, men and women for others. And we have pillars of what it means to be a graduate of a Jesuit school. We call it the grad at grad. Open to growth, religious, intellectually competent, loving, and committed to justice. That's what we're looking for in our graduate. I would tell 20-year-old Jim Boynton, you have to be open to growth. You have to be able to pivot. People always, I hear people in my profession saying, if you want to make God laugh, make plans. So be open to the plans that you are making are not necessarily going to be the plans that you're going to live out. I had no clue that I would go to Haiti, or I had no clue that I would work in Mexico. I worked in a Mexican prison for a while. I had no clue that I'd even be teaching in a Jesuit school in the States. I had no idea what I was going to do. I kind of thought maybe I would go and work in India. I had a great uncle, Bill Goodrow, my mom's uncle. He's also Clyde O'Rourke's uncle, if you know Clyde. So he worked in India, and I thought maybe I would go work in India. And I did go there. I went there for a year. But I never thought I'd be teaching history or working. I never thought I would call Detroit home. Detroit always, even the word always kind of scared me. Big cities. I mean, to us, Marquette or Traverse City were big cities. But that I've lived and thrived here in Detroit. But open to growth, to be able to pivot, to know that when things aren't going to go according to plan, that they're still going to go. And something is going to happen, and you can respond to that something in a positive or a negative way. So yeah, I would say to Jim Boynton, just be open to growth, be able to pivot and shoot from the hip, and know that whatever you're planning for is exactly not what is going to happen. I mean, you've raised a kid. I don't think. You raised a couple. That's not what you. When they were children, they grew up to probably something much more amazing than you ever even thought. You probably had your own plans for these kids, but no, it turned out totally different. I certainly know that your life turned out totally different than what Dolores was thinking when you were 14. Mm-hmm. But man, would you trade it? Probably not.
Not a second of it. I still remember, Jim, when Ashley was just a baby and we lived on the corner of Easterday and Ashburn, and you were living, I think, on campus or up near campus when that's when we were both still at Lake Superior State. You coming down and visiting, and I still remember where you sat in our living room. So funny, those little moments that I still remember you talking to me, and I believe you told me something that I don't even know if it's scientifically true, that a baby sees upside down for the first 6 months or something like that. You said something like that, and I thought...
I had just learned that in class. I had learned that in a psychology class at Lake State.
Okay.
Yes. So maybe they've learned differently since then, but yes, I had just learned that.
Because I remember that next few months thinking, she sees upside down? That must be weird. So can you go back? You said the Jesuit, guy, I think you called it men for others, right?
Yeah.
Or men and women for others. So there was open to growth, religious. Can you give me the other three or two? Or...
Yeah, open to growth, religious, loving, intellectually competent, and committed to justice.
I love it.
That's what we're looking for in our kids. And I know we're a Roman Catholic organization, and happily and proudly so. But many of our kids are not Catholic. Many of our own faculty are not, and we're perfectly fine with that. And as long as people are questioning and open to growth and learning, and open to growth means open to the world around them and reaching their potential, everything else will fall into place.
Right.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Yo, it's Lou Mobley
and Dre Moore
from the More Than a Dad podcast. This platform was created for dads trying to master that juggling act of fatherhood, life, and career.
Finding this balance can be a real challenge.
Our guests will feature fathers and mothers, creators and entrepreneurs, working professionals, and those re-entering society from being incarcerated.
New episodes drop every Friday on all podcast streaming platforms and the video on YouTube every Monday.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at More Than a Dad podcast.
Check out our latest episode and share with a parent.
So this is for the Bamboo Pack members. This is a write it down moment right here. What Brother Jim just said is open to growth. And then he elaborated on that, talking about having to be able to pivot. You have to pivot at times. And if you want to make God laugh, make plans. And we can choose how we respond to those pivots and those changes that are thrown at us. We can choose to respond positively or negatively. And then being religious. Now, for many people, you might not consider yourself religious in the Bamboo Pack, but spiritual, having a connection with some form of higher power, whether it be the universe or God or the nature itself. Being loving to others and yourself, being intellectually competent, and being committed to justice. Now, if every single one of us cannot find some incredible value in those 5 rules or those 5 guidelines, maybe this isn't the podcast for you, but those are powerful. All right. So Jim, now I feel like you've just won the Super Bowl, and I'm asking you what's next, and you're going to say, we're going to Disney World. But as of this 2022, you were named the 30th president of U of D Jesuit High School and Academy. Okay. What's next for you?
Well, we're looking at it right now. I first came to the school when I was in my 20s teaching. Actually, when I first came to the school, I came here to observe teachers. And the president then was a guy named Malcolm Karen, who was a Jesuit that joined the Jesuits with my great-uncle back in 1938, 39, 38, I think. And then I worked for a guy named Tim Shannon, and he was president here. Carl Kaiser, a fellow Youper from Menominee, he was president here for, I think, about 14 years. And then most recently was Ted Munns, who hailed from Cincinnati but worked in Chicago for a long time. Now I have this role. And my goal is to help for the foreseeable future, to help this institution reach its potential, and the teachers, the staff, the students as well. So what that means, Brian, this sounds so foreign to you and me who went to public schools, but our tuition here is about $15,000. People are paying that for high school. Well, to me, that sounds crazy. So 42% of our students are on financial aid, and I'm always trying to find scholarship money for kids so that every kid that wants to come to U of D Jesuit High School can come here, and tuition is not a factor, so that if they can't afford it, we have the money to cover them. We are in Detroit, and there used to be well over 30 Catholic high schools in the city of Detroit. And then around the time of the riots and after, one by one, they moved out of the city or they closed. Of those original schools, we're the only one still in the city. Now there's Cristo Rey High School and Loyola High School that are in the city of Detroit, but they're not of the original 30. They've opened up in the last 20 years or so. We are committed to the city of Detroit and to the students here and to being in the city. Recently, we acquired an abandoned rec center, the Johnson Recreation Center, which is about 2/3 of a mile north of our school. And we've put a lot of energy and finances into that to get it opened up again. But it's not just so our kids can use the field and practice. We want to have that center that used to be a community center for the neighborhood, that it can be open for them as well, so that we can embrace our neighbors and be part of the community, be good citizens, be good neighbors, and be part of this city that has such a wonderful history. The founders of the city of Detroit came from St. Ignace. Cadillac left our hometown, St. Ignace, in 1701, came down here and established the city of Detroit. Oddly enough, I feel a connection there. And so anything we can do to continue the great academic, athletic, intellectual, extracurricular arts that we can do here in the city of Detroit for these young men that come here. That's my goal. That's my life for the foreseeable future.
Wow, I think that's so admirable.
And when I'm not in Detroit, I'm going to be up north, either playing the fiddle or out in the woods.
Yeah, my mother has missed you the last couple times that you have been up there playing, and she's been disappointed. So I'll tell her sometimes Jim Boynton was up there playing. Oh, I should have gone last night. But I'll let her know you said hello. In fact, she'll be listening to this podcast. My mother is for you, Jim, and for the Bamboo Pack. Every time I record a podcast, my mother gets a copy of it that day. Whether it's going to be broadcast 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out, she gets a copy that day, and she listens to it every single night. So she always has a sneak peek on every one of the podcasts. So she'll be hearing this one tonight.
Oh, great. Well, hello, Mrs. Bosley.
Sure, she'll be smiling when she hears that, Jim. I think that's so admirable. Of all the, would you say 300 or 30 Catholic schools? And you are the last
30 Catholic schools in Detroit.
And you're the last one standing. And you guys have stuck in and really cemented your roots in the Detroit city, the city of Detroit. Now, no, Jim, I know that what your job is obviously has a lot of responsibility, and I'm sure it's rather daunting and challenging at times. Can you share with us a little bit, who do you have surrounding you as far as a leadership team? Just even summarize what you have as a leadership team. You don't have to share names or anything, but how are they supporting you, and what do they do for you in the high school and academy?
Okay, so we have two major teams here in the school. One is, we call it the school life team. Those are the people that report to the principal. And that's going to be athletic director, academic assistant principal, our dean of students, which is discipline, and head of campus ministry. We certainly didn't have that when we were kids. I am in charge of what's called the leadership team, and the people that report to me would be the head of facilities. And we got a lot of facilities here, and I always tell people our building is 90 years old, and my dad is 90 years old. Ask him about his plumbing. Well, we got the same issues here, so there's always money to be put in the building. Our CFO, so all the financial dealings with the school. We have development, so we're always trying to raise money, not only for the facilities, but for scholarships. That reports to me. Obviously, the principal, probably the number two guy in the school, and I wouldn't even say number two. I would say joint number one with me. Got a great principal here. The person that is in charge of marketing and admissions reports to me, and then the person that is in charge now of the programs and outreach from the Johnson Rec Center. So those are the people that report to me. And, it's always a dance. It's always fun. I will tell your listeners, it's impossible for me it's impossible for me to do this alone. So we have that great team, but it's also impossible for me to try to manage the people, and that's why I have a highly sought after coach that I use. You might know him. No, Brian, I will say you've been very helpful to me and to the institution, to the school, helping us move things forward. Because like as I said before, we're all part of a community. We got to be connected, and you can't do this on your own. And if you have a good team around you, a good community, then that's the best way to get things done. And that's what any functioning team, in my opinion, is a good community. Whether that means you're a small town or a large state, and if you don't have a functioning working community, it's not going to go well. And my goal is to have U of D Jesuit be a larger community that encompasses even smaller communities. And that's my goal here.
Well, what I can share with you, Jim, and thank you for the shout out. It's a privilege and an honor to work with you and your team. At 26 years of coaching individuals and leaders and teams, I can share with you that there's getting to know you, obviously, on a professional level over the past several months, as well as your leadership team. I can honestly say U of D Jesuit's in really good hands for the next several years and hopefully well into the next few decades as you guys continue to make and progress along the way. So well done. All right, Jim, well, one last question, and that is there any question I didn't ask that you would like me to have asked, or anything you want to share as we part ways here with the Bamboo Pack members?
That's a great question, because I always ask when I'm interviewing people, what question didn't I ask? I would say that you hit it pretty well. The only thing I'd throw back to you is, could you say to your audience what kind of pets you had when you were a kid?
For me or you? For you?
For you.
You want me to ask you that question?
I'll answer it for you. Brian had a pet skunk when we were a kid.
Oh, that's right, I did.
You didn't have it too long, but I remember going to your house and you had a pet skunk. Yeah, and I thought that was pretty cool.
It didn't last long. I also had a pet Arctic fox for a while. And
yes, you did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It died in the bathtub without water in it. It just died, and I brought it it didn't die there. I had to bring it to the vet in Sheboygan, and it died of rabies, of all things. And I didn't know that as I was handling this thing and carrying it and putting it in a box. It wasn't very old. Yeah, I forgot I had the pet skunk. And this will gross out some people, but I remember walking out one morning and I knew it was dead because its eyes were full of maggots. That's usually a pretty good sign that it was dead.
That's usually, when I worked in Haiti, that was always a sign.
That was a good sign. Yeah, I could well imagine. Yeah, that was a good sign.
I'll just say, the last thing I would just say is, when I started working in administration here, when I was principal, I realized quite soon into it that I was over my head. And I started going through people told me that I needed, it'd be a good idea to get a coach. And I just started going through the internet and trying to find a coach. And that's how I stumbled upon you. I wasn't looking for Brian Bosley. And I'm like, oh my God, is that Bose 74 from high school? And that's when I called you up. And I remember that's the first thing I said, is this Bose 74 from high school? And it was, to me, it's amazing how we cross paths again after so many years. At that point, you were in Grand Rapids and I was in Detroit. And again, open to growth. I just be open to who are the people in your life that you're going to run into again. It's seldom that I don't cross paths with someone more than once.
Yeah, it's so true. For the Bamboo Pack members, this Bose 74 references, for some reason, well, my football number our senior year was 70. Mine was 74. For some reason, Jim really liked the idea that I wrote Bose 74 on several items, whether it was book covers or I think I carved it into a couple of desks or wrote it with a marker on a couple of desks. So that's been my nickname from Brother Jim for the better part of 40 years, is Bose 74. So.
Well, and I didn't play football with you guys, but I announced the games. So I used to announce that from the press box. That was kind of fun.
That was 74. Not very often for doing good things though on the field, but anyway. So, I got to share with you. This has been an honor. I've had Jim. I'm thinking right now. This is perhaps you're the fourth or fifth individual we have had on the Bamboo Lab podcast from St. Ignace, maybe third, fourth, fifth. And I've got a couple of more people. Our community is rich with talented, amazing people. Small little town of less than 3,000 people with a 5-mile bridge in its backyard has such amazingly beautiful, rich stories of not just the history of of the land and the people, but of the current people, of the generation that grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So you're just one of those, and I couldn't be more proud to call you a friend. This has been an amazing lesson here of things that you went on a track I never even knew about you. So I really know that the Bamboo Pack is going to get a lot of value out of here. And for all you Bamboo Pack members, if you loved what Brother Jim has said and learned something, please hit that like button, smash that like button. Give us a ranking on Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Audible, wherever you're listening to, and share this podcast episode with 3 other people. This is really, really good stuff. This is living history. And we have living history on the other end of the microphone today. All right, my friend, Brother Jim Boynton, 30th president of UOD Jesuit High School and Academy. I can't thank you enough for being such an amazing guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you.
All right, Bamboo Pack members, thank you for joining in. I appreciate you all. We'll be in touch. We'll talk again in the next few days. In the meantime, get out there and sculpt your life. Please get out there and strive for your best. Show love and respect to others. And by all means, live intentional. Take care.